She never imagined that she would be the host of her own CNN program when she started her career in finance doing math on Wall Street. However, Erin Burnett became one of the most identifiable voices in television news after switching from the business world to broadcast journalism. She has been in the public eye for years and is well known for her incisive interviews, assured analysis, and the occasional dispute that makes headlines. And it's understandable that people are interested in her salary given her background and her highly sought-after nighttime slot at CNN. What is Erin Burnett's actual salary? Let's examine it more closely. Erin Burnett, like many aspirational recent grads, began her career in finance by working as a financial analyst at Goldman Sachs, but her destiny was different. She received an article about Willow Bay, a former Estee Lauder model who had rebranded herself as co-host of CNN Moneyline one day from her sister and brother-in-law. Inspired and intrigued, Burnett took a seat and extolled her love and her desire to collaborate on the show in what she humorously referred to as a stalker letter to Bay. She was surprised when Bay answered. After interviewing Burnett, she took a chance and hired her to conduct research that was a wonderful fit for her experience in banking analysis. Everything would alter with just one chance. Shortly after, Burnett was employed as an assistant by Maria Bartiromo, another prominent personality in financial news, and she was stationed in CNBC New York studios at 5 Penn Plaza, which is only a short distance from Madison Square Garden. Her personal life stabilized while her profession flourished. Looking back, Burnett said that her initial reaction upon seeing David Rubalata, an executive at Stifel Financial Corp., on a blind date in 2004 was, "I hope that's him." It was at that meeting that a bond that would endure would be established. Burnett's transition from behind the camera to in front of it happened gradually from a professional standpoint. Her career really took off when she joined CNBC in 2005 after getting expertise at Bloomberg. She co-hosted the fast-paced program Street Signs, which was broadcast live from the floor of the New York Stock Exchange with the late Mark Haynes. She immediately gained recognition for her astute analysis and self-assured demeanor. Then, at the pinnacle of her success, Burnett took a risk. She switched from CNBC to CNN in May 2011. Erin Burnett's career reached its greatest turning point when she was hired by CNN. She had finally made it to CNBC, the network she had adored since she was a young girl, after years of establishing her image there through talk show appearances and positive press coverage. For Burnett, this was a profoundly personal as well as a professional advancement. As a child growing up in Mardella Springs, she would see CNN anchors and put herself in their shoes whenever her family traveled to Washington, D.C. She would jog past Central Park South and gaze up at the enormous CNN clock that dominated the skyline even later when she was living in New York. For her, the brand had always stood for a unique form of grandeur and authority. She was going inside now. She was named the network's new chief business and economics correspondent by CNN, and that summer, her own daily primetime show was scheduled to debut. Will Surratt, executive producer of the show, said it was both thrilling and daunting. He was familiar with the fast-paced, personality-driven world of cable news, having worked with such well-known figures as Paul Azan, Anderson Cooper, and Donnie Douche. For Surratt, teamwork was always essential. Only when the producer and the anchor are totally in sync can great shows flourish, and he thought he had found the right match in Erin Burnett. In October, she formally introduced Outfront, a show that embodied not only her name, but also her distinctive journalism approach. The response to Erin Burnett's CNN program, Outfront, was quick and not particularly positive. She was thrust into the center of Occupy Wall Street in her debut episode, covering the demonstrations in a tone that many perceived as derisive. Critics jumped in almost at once. Filmmaker Michael Moore publicly voiced his displeasure, and Media Matters dubbed it a cheap shot article and demanded she apologize. This led to a dispute that Burnett herself brought up later, the same evening on her broadcast. There was more criticism to come. According to David Zurwick of the Baltimore Sun, viewers perceived Burnett as arrogant, rich, and disconnected from the hardships of common people, despite despite the fact that many of them were seeking understanding and compassion during a financial crisis. She also faced criticism for her program Seriously, which appeared to be based on Anderson Cooper's Ridiculist. Critics noted that Burnett came out as patronizing and contemptuous, while Cooper had gained credibility via years of field reporting, allowing him to make light of others. Forbes' Eric Jackson went one step further and advised her to quit smiling and winking at demonstrators as though they were ignorant, pointing out that many of them were actually CNN viewers. Glenn Greenwald of Salon, who studied Burnett's career path from Goldman Sachs to CNBC to CNN, added gasoline to the fire by claiming that her Wall Street experience made her the ideal illustration of how corporate media handpick journalists who share their beliefs and ethos. He rejected the notion that she was an impartial journalist, describing the act as embarrassing and out of date. While conceding that strong reactions were unavoidable, CNN stood with Burnett and released a statement expressing support for her and the front team. However, the numbers behind the scenes revealed a different picture. The show's ratings fell by 30% in just 10 days after its debut. The crucial 25-54 age group dropped to just 67,000 views 2 weeks later. By the end of the first month, the media was publicly questioning her credibility. In a direct question of whether Erin Burnett could save her new post, CBS News even released what they dubbed a timeline of her debacle. Burnett maintained balance in her personal life despite the high-pressure situations in her business life. She eventually married her longtime partner in December 2012, right before Christmas, a time of year she and David Rubalata cherished. In keeping with their understated aesthetic, they went to City Hall rather than the glamour of a lavish wedding. Visitors wore anything from dresses to jeans, and Burnett herself eschewed the customary white dress in favor of a striking red one that was straightforward, uniquely theirs. Erin Burnett and her husband, David Rubalata, started a family after getting married. 2013 saw the birth of their first child, a son called Niall Thomas. They had their youngest child, Owen Thomas, in 2018 after welcoming their daughter, Colby Isabel, 2 years earlier. Burnett's perspective had a significant change after becoming a mother. She has frequently talked about how having children made her realize how fleeting life is and how stories about them felt much more direct and intimate. Her perspective on the world and her approach to her profession have been influenced by her 3 children. Burnett has thought about how growing older with her family has altered her perspective. She used to be part of the next generation, but now she finds herself looking to the future. Her offspring will inherit. Her reporting has become more introspective and connected to the broader picture of what lies ahead as a result. It has never been easy to balance the responsibilities of a prominent media profession with the upbringing of a small family. Burnett has acknowledged that her routine is demanding. She frequently wakes up between 2 and 5 in the morning to read the news across the world, then takes a quick nap before rising up again at 7 to make breakfast and drop her kids off at school. Her nights are long because she frequently has to be gone at work until about 8:30 p.m., at which point she comes home to spend time with her children before going to bed. There are times when work must take precedence, and making such decisions is not always easy. An intended brief assignment turned into 2 exhausting weeks of reporting from Ukraine following Russia's invasion. Even though it is challenging, she has made the decision to find value in these moments because she feels it is crucial for her kids to know the significance and difficulties of her work, even if it means she must be away. Erin then celebrated a significant milestone in 2021, the 10th anniversary of hosting Erin Burnett Out Front. For her, 10 years on the air wasn't enough. It was a complete circle moment as well. In fact, Burnett began her journalism career at CNN. Thus, returning felt like a return to her origins. She has called the network's transformations throughout the years massive. She clarified that CNN used to operate more or less as a breaking news service. They excelled at responding to major events, but nowadays, even when there isn't breaking news happening all the time, people continue to visit the network. CNN has become a place that represents something to her: accountability, truth, and analysis. In her own way, Burnett has embraced that task. Her 7 p.m. time slot may appear inconvenient. It falls at the perfect moment for individuals to wind down from the day, have dinner, or put the kids to bed. Although it's not prime time, it's also not the more subdued part of the day when news is broadcast in the background. Nevertheless, she has made room for a variety of interviews, hard news, and perceptive analysis. At that hour, rivals like MSNBC and Fox placed a greater emphasis on opinion. But Burnett took a different approach. It was a wise decision. Although Fox News still dominated cable news overall, her show surpassed Joy Reid's show on MSNBC to rank among CNN top 3 most watched shows within the crucial 25-54 demographic. Burnett's balance is what sets her apart. Although she does not consider herself an opinion host, she is not afraid to speak the truth, whether it's criticizing Republicans, promoting anti-vaccine sentiment, asking Biden's team about their Saudi Arabian connections, or engaging with prominent individuals like Treasury Secretary Janet Yellen during heated discussions over the debt ceiling. She has made it clear that her show is centered on interviews and analysis, which occasionally entails stating uncomfortable facts. However, her art is defined by more than simply the political heavyweights. Deeply personal encounters have been among Burnett's most impactful moments, particularly during the COVID-19 pandemic. Maura Lewinger, whose husband Joe passed away from the virus, had an interview that has stuck with her. Burnett sobbed on television as Maura talked about saying goodbye via FaceTime, finding it difficult to move on. It served as a reminder to her that reporters are also individuals. When the cameras stop rolling, the weight of a narrative doesn't always remain in the studio. This emotional attachment to her reporting stems from Burnett's original motivation for becoming a journalist, to provide guidance, information, and a stable voice during uncertain times. Like so many others, she acknowledges that the pandemic altered her. It influenced not just her personal life, but also her professional style. Moving forward, of course, there have been difficulties associated with being in the spotlight. Online trolls have been known to criticize Burnett harshly, dismissing her work or accusing her of phoning it in. Even while she doesn't want to waste time responding to that type of targeted response, she has publicly discussed how hard it is to avoid taking it personally. However, it was the threats in real life that surprised her, not the insults she received online. She started receiving death threats in 2021, which continued for months. Nicholas Ryan Hedgecoe Sullivan, a Canadian, frequently used fictitious profiles to post violent messages on social media directed at her and her family. Authorities believed he was not a genuine threat, despite his insistence to the contrary. Again in 2022, when speaking with a Ukrainian man whose relatives had perished in a Russian strike, even an experienced journalist was unable to contain the gravity of the news she was covering in one of those infrequent occasions. The human cost of the protracted conflict in Ukraine was becoming increasingly difficult to overlook, not only for those affected, but also for viewers, and even for the journalists who are supposed to report on their stories. Sergei Parabines, a father who had recently lost his wife Tiziana and their 2 kids, was the man she spoke with. His family had attempted to escape while he was gone in eastern Ukraine tending to his ailing mother. Tiziana tried to flee with the kids, according to claims from prominent publications including the Washington Post and the New York Times, when their convoy was fired upon. They were eventually ensnared in the pandemonium of the invasion after being forced to continue on, 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 Haribines described his final talk with Tessiana the evening before she passed away. Their house had already lost electricity, gas, and water at that point. They were able to have a brief conversation on the prospect of evacuation despite the faltering connection. Everything changed the following day. He referred to Tessiana as both his best friend and his wife of 23 years. In order to make their tie, as he put it, legal in the sky, they even reaffirmed their vows in a church ceremony in 2012. When she was killed, she was 43. She works as a financial director for a computer company in Silicon Valley and is well known for her upbeat demeanor, love of cycling, skiing, and flower planting. At their home in the country, Haribines became emotional when Burnett inquired about his children. Mikita was 18 years old, a university student majoring in programming and aspiring to work in information technology. Elisa, his 9-year-old daughter, enjoyed dancing, painting, and studying English. He described them as happy, typical kids. The way he learned the truth added to the eerie quality of his story. Using Google Maps, he had been monitoring their location when he spotted something strange. He soon came onto a picture of shelling casualties on Twitter. He recognized the clothes and possessions of his children among them. He found out his family was gone that way. The interview had an impact that extended well beyond television. Reactions erupted on social media, with some praising Burnett's unvarnished demonstration of empathy and others wondering if she had gone too far in becoming more than just a participant. It was simply described as pure heartbreak by one viewer. Regardless of viewpoint, the incident made clear the crippling emotional burden of reporting on such a catastrophe. A reminder that families torn apart by loss are hidden behind every headline. However, beneath that sensitivity lay a journalist who was not afraid to take chances, and those chances would eventually come back to haunt her. When Erin Burnett was formally prohibited from entering Russia in 2023, she became the focus of global attention. It was a political decision rather than a personal one. In direct retaliation for U.S. sanctions related to the war in Ukraine, the Russian Ministry of Foreign Affairs declared in the spring of that year that it was preventing 500 Americans from entering the nation. The large and well-known list included journalists like Burnett, late-night hosts like Seth Meyers, and former President Barack Obama. She wasn't the only CNN personality singled out either. Additionally named were Timothy Naftali, Byrna Golodryga, and even Nick Payton Walsh, who was born in Britain. The timing made it obvious that Moscow was also retaliating against American media sites covering its conflict, even though the Russian government said the bans were directed at those who had spoken out against the rioters on January 6. Burnett handled the announcement with her typical poise as she made it live on her show. She calmly clarified that she was on the list and emphasized the importance of covering Ukraine. The prohibition, in her opinion, simply served to highlight how critical it was to keep raising awareness of the situation in both Russia and Ukraine. Domestic political divisions were further exacerbated by the conflict in Ukraine, particularly between Donald Trump and Mike Pence, his former vice president. By the end of 2023, Burnett's coverage was affected by such conflicts. Trump said in an interview in October that immigration was polluting our nation's blood. Congressman Anthony Desposito was informed by Burnett on Outfront that this language was reminiscent of Hitler's previous statements. Although the congressman acknowledged that the remarks were not the greatest ones, the incident provoked a strong criticism. Trump, who has always watched TV news closely, reacted angrily. Early on a Saturday morning, he attacked Burnett on his site, Truth Social, calling her show dull and making fun of her ratings. The post tone was reminiscent of his previous criticism of media personalities such as Joe Scarborough and Mika Brzezinski. It was obvious that Burnett's critique had touched a nerve. She was in the heart of yet another controversy in 2024. In one section, Burnett read from an Atlantic piece that said Trump had made a disrespectful statement about Vanessa Guillen's ancestry while dismissing the expense of a military funeral for the fallen soldier. She apologized on air after reciting the slur unedited while reading straight from the article. Many people praised her for not sugarcoating the information as the moment swiftly went viral on the internet. Others pointed out that it was uncommon for a cable anchor to use such unvarnished language in real time. The narrative itself was still unclear. While Mark Meadows, Trump's former chief of staff, publicly refuted the Atlantic's allegation Trump had previously volunteered to pay for the funeral. Claims that Ghislaine had insulted the soldier were also refuted by his sister. However, the article's anonymous sources implied otherwise, sustaining the controversy. Additionally, Burnett's interviews kept sparking discussion. A 2024 meeting with Robert F. Kennedy Jr., who was serving in Trump's cabinet and campaigning for president, was one of the most talked about events. After pressing him about the personal toll his campaign was taking on him, Burnett played a video of his sister, filmmaker Rory Kennedy, expressing concern that his campaign would steal Biden's votes and give Trump the victory. Kennedy was clearly uncomfortable at the time and played down the criticism by highlighting his large family and the family members supporting him. Audiences were split after the conversation. Burnett received praise from some for asking direct, personal, and difficult questions that directly addressed the political issues. Some thought she went too far, claiming that she ought to have followed the rules instead. In any case, the atmosphere made that interview one of her career's most replayed and contentious moments. However, the subsequent transmission would set off one of the most powerful storms she has ever encountered. Following her live coverage of a horrific shooting on Park Avenue in July 2025, CNN anchor Erin Burnett became embroiled in controversy just after 6:30 p.m. During the height of the evening rush, 27-year-old Shane D. Tamura barged through the doors of a posh Midtown tower brandishing a weapon. The NFL headquarters and the financial behemoth Blackstone were located in the structure, which was not your typical high-rise. Tamura shot NYPD officer Didarel Islam dead in the lobby shortly after entering, and then proceeded to shoot 3 people. Tamura committed himself at the spot, according to later confirmation from the authorities. According to NYPD Commissioner Jessica Tisch, Tamura had a history of mental health issues and the outburst was abrupt and vicious. The commotion outside was documented on social media. Workers pouring out of the skyscraper with their hands up, pedestrians running for their lives. Erin Burnett was anchoring CNN live coverage during this entire period. She echoed some of the early contradictory information from law enforcement sources when she labeled the shooter as perhaps white amid the chaos of those initial reports. According to early rumors, the culprit may possibly be Middle Eastern. Burnett's on-air description sparked controversy after security footage appeared online, showing a man with a dark complexion, sunglasses, and an AR-15. Social media backlash was quick. Her reporting was questioned by users on X, formerly Twitter, who accused CNN of making snap decisions. While one commenter pointed out the inconsistency between Burnett's statements and the publicly available photographs, another person categorically rejected CNN as false news. Burnett's reputation at CNN has barely changed in spite of the controversy. At almost $6 million annually, she continues to be one of the network's highest-paid employees. Her estimated net worth is at $20 million, making her the 14th best-paid news anchor in the nation, according to industry reports. I appreciate you watching. Please like, subscribe, leave a comment, and enable post notifications if you liked it so that you can see our most recent material.